Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin will be looking to strengthen trade and diplomatic ties with one of his nation's biggest allies, India, in the face of hostilities and trade sanctions over the war in Ukraine. He'll be holding talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as both leaders are set to sign a number of deals. So let's get more on this visit with Aleksei Zakharov, fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, who joins me now from New Delhi. Aleksei, welcome to the program. Now, in the context of these vast economic sanctions placed on Russia, how important is Vladimir Putin's visit to India, given that it is now the fastest growing of the major global economies?
The visit is really important, and Russia is actually seeking to expand trade and economic cooperation with Russia, both against the backdrop of sanctions and also an attempt to lure India as the largest market for Russian companies. So there have been many attempts by Russian businesses to make inroads into the Indian market, and the agenda of this particular summit will be quite extensive, covering a wide range of areas within the economic cooperation of the two sides.
Yes, and then how big is Russian oil exports to India? How much will that feature as far as trade is concerned?
Well, over the past 3.5 years, Russia has emerged as the main source of Indian oil imports. By value, it takes for about 35%. But currently, after the latest US sanctions kicked in on November 21, they hit the largest Russian oil companies. And as we've seen in the media reports, India started to cut its oil imports from Russia. Of course, I don't think that it's the end of the story. There are still some loopholes in the sanctions mechanisms, and there are attempts to recalibrate supply chains. Russia offers to import oil from non-sanctioned entities, and also some of the Indian companies, primarily public ones, are also looking for the ways to find new opportunities for going ahead with imports. So I think that it will be a large topic on the agenda.
Yes, and behind the closed doors of the Kremlin, is Moscow getting a little bit desperate, given that what the European Union has had to say in the past 24 hours, and that they will now completely and permanently stop using Russian gas and oil within a few years?
Well, I don't think that Moscow is getting desperate. The view that we can hear from the Russian officials and also from Russian experts that, oil flows will find its way, so that there are plenty of mechanisms on how to work around sanctions, and that eventually Russian partners, whether we take partners from the global south or even recipients in the European market, they can source Russian oil through intermediaries, through third parties, through a very lengthy supply chain. So eventually they believe that the Russian oil will get to the markets somehow, and that it's in the interest of the stability of the global oil market.
Yes, would that leave India perhaps vulnerable to secondary sanctions, something that the US has warned countries like India about when it comes to importing oil from Russia, and that's now been the subject of tariffs for India?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit a separate subject. I mean, the tariffs that are there against the Indian exports to the United States, they are now part of a larger discussion between Indian and US officials, as the two sides are discussing to strike a trade deal. So as far as we have seen, there is some progress on this subject, but I guess that India will try to avoid discussing this part of its foreign policy agenda during this summit with Vladimir Putin.
Yes, and it's been written quite widely that President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, they will be signing a number of deals during this visit. It's not been publicized yet, but what do you believe these deals might entail?
From what we know, there are about 10 intergovernmental agreements that are expected. Some of them will include also commercial agreements between Russian and Indian companies. From what has already been announced, there should be an agreement on labor mobility, because labor force from India has emerged as an important part of Russian attempt to address the demographic problems in its economy, and to find workforce from several specific sectors within its economy. So it will be an important deal. Other deals may also include some space cooperation. Of course, the defense cooperation is widely discussed, though I don't expect any imminent deals coming in during this particular summit. Probably it will be there at the negotiation table for some time. But of course, as I mentioned, I think I would expect more deals on trade and economic cooperation. But the specifics of that, remains to be seen.
Yes, and do you expect the war in Ukraine to be on the agenda? And perhaps you can remind us where India sits on this conflict.
Yeah, so today Vladimir Putin is expected to arrive in the evening, and there will be a private dinner with Prime Minister Modi. They are expected to have an informal discussion, and I think that's where the topic of Ukraine will be discussed in detail. From what we know from previous summits, Ukraine has always come up as an important topic, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi always mentioned and tried to deliver his message that it's not the year of war and it's the time to stop hostilities. So I would expect some similar announcement from the Indian officialdom, and I think that he will try to privately deliver his message again.
And what might that message be? Do you think perhaps the Prime Minister Modi, he's not one to publicly criticize world leaders publicly, but what would he be telling Vladimir Putin in the context? Would he want Putin to accept the concessions that were on offer when the US and Moscow officials met?
I think that the main effort will be to get the status of the current peace talks, because there have been many developments over the past week, and the peace proposals have been amended several times. And a few days ago, we have seen an American delegation coming to Moscow and having a long conversation with Putin and his close associates. So I think that the Indian diplomacy will try to get the status and also like the Russian mood to advance with these proposals, with the new, pointers for the peace effort, and probably see if there is a way forward in terms of how to end the war in Ukraine.
And just finally, how do you think India has been balancing its relations with the West as the war rages on, as India also continues to buy Russian weapons?
Well, I think India has been balancing well its long-standing policy of diversification of arms sources. And over the past 10 years, I think that Russia's share of Indian arms market has significantly reduced as India has been prioritizing deals with other partners. It has been connected both with the intention not to be over-dependent on Russia, and also it was affected by the US sanctions against the Russian military-industrial complex. So I think that India has been trying to find the best deals for its interests, but at the same time we can see that Russia is still there. Russia will remain a key defense partner for India, because many military platforms that have been supplied since the end of the Cold War, they will be there within the Indian armed forces for maybe 1-2 decades longer. That's why there is a long-standing and enduring partnership in the spheres between New Delhi and Moscow, and maybe some new deals will also come in.
Okay, Aleksei Zakharov, really appreciate your analysis on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.